So the deeper, the thicker the liquidity, the less the price impact, which can be good because if you want billionaires to get into your asset, they don't want to push the price up too hard, too fast. They want to accumulate a position first. So if there's deeper liquidity, it means that it smothers the ability for price to get volatile, move up and down. Whereas like if you remove liquidity, it makes it more choppy and more volatile, which gives more opportunity to the little guy. And so it's a fine line between too much and too little. And as you'll see in coins like my coin, like the Axis chart, or some of these other ones that have a lot of volatility in them, there's huge opportunity in those swings. And the periods where the price goes flat, you'll notice like the liquidity is thicker, and the periods where the price is very bouncy is when the liquidity is less.
Why do you think he would be talking about all this stuff in detail and making all these public moves that, you know, we could see on chain, the buy? I mean, when I say he, I mean, you know, whoever controls the keys, making the buys, has the SAC wallet, all that stuff. Could be Richard, could be anybody, could be a company, could be whatever. But just why does all this information being publicly presented? Like, what do you think is the message for like, is he just reminding us of what could happen? You know, what we should have no expectations of, but like why make everything public? Why not?
I think he's just educating. I think he's just educating us all and reminding us of how the game's played and what to look for. So if you saw like all of the major pulse pairs drop by 50% in liquidity overnight, if the total pulse liquidity was like $100 million and you saw it drop to 50 million overnight, you could anticipate that, hey, there's going to be a big move coming because less liquidity, bigger price moves. But if it doubles from 50 million to 100 million, it just became like 4 times as difficult to push the price around. So think about those things. That could be part of it. I think that generally he wants people to be educated. Maybe he's also saying, hey, you know, there's a lot of liquidity right now. If you remove some of your liquidity, it's easier to move the price, for better or for worse. Or, hey, there's a lot of liquidity right now. If you add more, we can like reduce downside from sellers. It depends on the angle that you think he's trying to say, because it could be different for every player. Ultimately this just gives the user base a better foundation and education to stand on to make decisions, I guess.
There's always this battle between, you know, people yelling, "Oh, there's not enough liquidity," and then people yelling, "Oh, you know, you can think about these strategies. Oh, there's too much liquidity. The price can't move as much because it's so thick." How do you reconcile those two? Like, what is the right time to have a lot of liquidity and less liquidity, especially if we see whales out there with billions of dollars or millions of dollars that, you know, may be putting it to use? Like, when is the best time to have thick and thin liquidity?
So like you at the bottom of a range on a price chart where prices are starting to flatten out and volumes are starting to taper off, you want to see the liquidity thin, because then that means the pump back up can be bigger and faster. Whereas like after a big pump has occurred, you want to see somebody come in and add a bunch of liquidity to reduce the downside pressure. If you're a bull, if you're a bear, you have to reverse what I just said. So if you're a bear, you want to see very low liquidity at the tops of ranges so that, well, okay. If you're a bear and you're looking to exit and you're in something and you're looking to exit, you want that lot of liquidity up there at the top of a pump, because then you can sell into that and extract that value. If you're a bull, this is what makes market making hard, guys, is like if you're a bull, you want low liquidity at the bottom of a range where volumes are tapering off and the price is starting to go sideways so that you can get a big pump off that level. And then you want to come back in and backfill with a lot of liquidity after the pumps are done so that you can get done with a round of a wave of sellers. And then after that wave of sellers is gone, you want to thin the liquidity again and pump it the next leg again, because like remember, if there's less liquidity, you can get another leg out of it, another pump higher with less economic energy input. So it's kind of like if you look at have you ever seen like a phalanx where like back in the days of the battle of Thermopylae, and the Spartans would lock shields side by side, and then they would move up they would make a step forward, and then they would make a step forward. You could think of that as like the liquidity wall supporting the price behind where the price is at. And you'd want to have that there as a price support if you're trying to protect a range. Whereas like if you want to get the most upside potential, you actually have to remove your defense as well. So this is the thing, is like with liquidity, you have to remove your defense to go on offense. You can't have defense and offense both at play at the same time without inputting way more economic energy, unless you're using single-sided liquidity. So this, because we're using double-sided liquidity, you do have to actively add and remove liquidity before and after moves to get the desired outcome. However, by using tools like 9mm single-sided liquidity, you can buffer downside but remove all the top side sell pressure. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. But what's best for price is actually double-sided equal liquidity, because it holds all players accountable who are going to provide the liquidity, because they would have to have equal amounts of both sides of the pair, and they can't just be like a net seller who could just put over, like what happened with the Swami token, where price went up a lot. Sami got $5 million of this coin for free, dropped into his wallet. He put up a huge sell wall. It was a $68 million sell wall to basically stop the price in its tracks and kill the movement. But he had no skin in the game on the buy side. So if there was no Uniswap V3, he would have had to put up his own Pulse liquidity to pair it with $5 million worth at the time on both sides, which held him accountable to that move. But instead, because he used 9mm single-sided, he had to be not accountable at all. He could get these coins for free and just put that there and kind of kill the project. And that's what happened, for better or for worse. I'm not throwing shade on the guy, because he probably didn't know who made the coin, what the motive was, what damage that could do to his brand. And so I understand, why you want to shut. If somebody made a coin about me, I wouldn't necessarily support that either, because I didn't make it, right? So I understand that angle. But that's what happens when that kind of situation occurs, is if you put too much overhead sell pressure on single-sided and you're not accountable for the other side, you have no skin in the game. You just get to this is what's the problem with early the sacrifice phases and early drops and early buy-ins, is you're basically giving these people money with them having to put very minimal skin in the game in some cases, but then they can just be a problem for the project long term and just extract.
What do you think is more bullish, seeing liquidity being removed or being added for PulseChain at this point?
What needs to happen right now is dependent on the players that's coming in to move the price chart. So I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I think just looking at the Pulse pair, there's the main Pulse die pair, there's over $20 million on there. And that's fine. It'll, that's a healthy amount of liquidity to support the price at these levels. And it's also appropriate, because if you saw somebody inject $20 million, it's going to 4x the price. So if somebody came in here and put $20 million in here, price would get to 0.0037, which would be a new all-time high. And if somebody were to sell $20 million, it would cut the price by 75%. Theoretically, right? Because this is just this one pool we're looking at. It would drop price to new all-time lows, but they would also have to sell somewhere in the realm of 350 to 400 billion Pulse. And it's not totally, the example doesn't totally make sense, because in this case we're just looking at one wrapped Pulse pool, and there's literally thousands of wrapped Pulse pools that you could be tapping from. So there's probably, realistically, there's probably $100 million of Pulse liquidity out there. So it kind of changes the price or the numbers I just gave you. But that's a general idea of what would happen on this particular pair, assuming this was the only pair that existed for Pulse and DAI and USD. $20 million to the upside moves price 4x. $20 million to the downside moves price minus 75%. Is that enough? yeah, there's not very many people that have 300, 400 billion PLS. And to take that kind of risk to sell that off, that would get immediately bought back up, and they would lose their position in the game. Because you can't play the game like that, or you get left behind. There's enough hungry people that want that many coins at those prices. So if you were to sell it and to buy it up that high, you're taking so much supply off the market with that very little economic energy that you'd probably create a higher price floor somewhere. And we'll see that happen here, where we've already seen this kind of a move happen between January 7th and January 19th, where there was $140 million of volume, and the price went up 211%. So you got a 3x on $140 million of volume. Over 50% of that was buy volume. So that means that there was about $75 million of buy volume for a 3x there. So that's kind of more in the realm of what you'd be looking for this next 3 to 4x is probably $150, $200 million of volume in both directions.